It's a busy day in downtown Ann Arbor, Michigan, as students return back to university after a nice summer break. So I decided to take Tesla Full Self-Driving version 13.2.9 downtown just to confirm how amazing we already know full self-driving already is. And I will tell you up front, in this video, I do not have to do a single thing. And that will not surprise most people. But if you think back to a year, 2, or even 3 years ago, if I had a drive like what you're about to see, everyone would have been losing their minds at how impressive this is. Now, I do want to emphasize and keep in mind, this drive is still really impressive. The car does a great job. It is extremely comfortable, which you can't quite see through the video, so you'll have to trust me on that one. But the maneuvers it makes are safe, confident, and respectful of the other drivers and VRUs around the vehicle. But as we go through this drive and scrutinize some of the more impressive moves that we are about to see, we have another update looming. Within the next few weeks, we should be getting an update to Tesla's full self-driving version 14. I did go over what that should be bringing in a previous video if you want to check that video out, but the concrete details and of course the full list of updates and improvements that we're going to get is still unknown at this point. But Elon Musk did say over on X that version 14 should be 2 to 3 times safer than a human driver. Did you see that, cyclist? FSD did. That's how safe it is. Now, exactly where he gets that metric, how he measures it, we'll never know for sure. The easiest thing for us to probably guess around is how often human drivers get into accidents on average, which is right around 1 accident every 500,000 miles. So with that in mind, you would think full self-driving version 14 is going to only average an accident every 1 to 1.5 million miles. It does sound pretty impressive, but for a robotaxi service where there's going to be thousands of vehicles on the road, I do think the number needs to be a bit higher than that. But for what we have today, for what Tesla Full Self-Driving is doing out in the wild, it is a very impressive number, and we have to keep in mind that this is still the worst it is ever going to be, and will hopefully go up to 1 million miles per accident, up to 2 million, or even 10 or 20 or 50 million miles per accident is a number that I would be more comfortable with replacing every vehicle on the road with an autonomously driving vehicle. But all of that is very far future, so let's stick with what we have going on here today. Now, Tesla's robotaxi service in Austin, Texas has just released another expansion to the map, which is extremely impressive. Unfortunately, there are still safety riders in the vehicles in Austin, but the continued rapid expansion of the map, it hasn't even been 3 months yet, and this area is far surpassing Waymo's service area, is a really good sign. The next major hurdles we want to see out of the robotaxi service is getting rid of that safety passenger, number 1, and number 2, scaling up the amount of vehicles. And I think these two things are related. If you have to have safety passengers monitoring the vehicle, supervising it, to be honest, is what we can call it, then it will be more difficult to ramp up the amount of vehicles because you have to have a person for every vehicle. Once that safety passenger is gone, Tesla can rapidly add tons of robotaxis to their network in Austin and then other places once the service is expanded. Now, Elon has said he expects Tesla to cover about half the population by the end of this year, and that seems like a huge goal. Now, Tesla is no stranger to gigantic goals that, to be frank, they often miss, but they are where they are. They've gotten as far as they have because they are always pushing the boundary and trying to reach these insane goals that most people say are impossible, but they do usually eventually happen, just late instead of never, which late, I think we can agree, is a much better alternative than never. We all want our next FSD update. It's been so long, we cannot wait for FSD version 14. Now, with that said, I know you also want your personal information deleted from the internet using today's sponsor, Delete Me. Data brokers are out there on the internet collecting your personal information by various means, and this information includes your full name, your phone number, your address, where you work, your age, estimated income, even your relationship status, and they're also collecting the information about the people around you. They then take this information, sell it to third parties, and that can lead to identity theft, phishing, and other scams. But thankfully, there is a way to get your personal information removed from these data brokers, and that is today's sponsor, Delete Me. Delete Me goes to these data brokers and gets this information removed for you. Delete Me saves you hours and hours of time. You don't have to go to these data brokers and request your information be removed. Delete Me does all of that for you. I have been using Delete Me for about 2 years now, and I've seen my personal information disappear from these websites. Delete Me has reviewed thousands of these listings on my behalf and removed my address, name, age, and other personal information from these data data brokers, saving me tons of time and saving me from potential scams. So don't wait, use my link down below, save 20% on Delete Me and get your personal information removed from the internet just like I have. Thank you to Delete Me for sponsoring this video. Now FSD is stopped at this red light and it is not attempting to turn on red, and it seems like it is because of the no turn on red sign. Now overall, this is a very simple maneuver and should not be much of a problem, but we know in the past this has been difficult for FSD. It has basically ignored these signs or not been coded or trained to properly react to them. But here we have the car patiently waiting for the full red light, and it doesn't move from the stop line until the light turns green. So this is just one of those small maneuvers. It's not complicated, but it's something of course a robotaxi needs to be able to correctly handle, and we see it in this drive being done correctly. Now, with supposedly half of the population being covered by the end of the year, multiple of the places that will need to be covered will have snow in the winter. And this is kind of what I think of as one of the final bosses of autonomy and full self-driving. And Elon even mentioned this on an earnings call a couple of earnings calls ago, how Tesla will have to have different kind of like driver profiles for different areas. And he specifically called out snow. You have to drive a very certain special way when you're driving in snow. And if you are familiar, if you drive in snow and you're listening to this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You probably do the same test that I do. When I get out on snowy roads, I give it a little extra hard brake just to see if I'm going to slide, or maybe I step on the accelerator a little extra hard just to see if there's going to be any sliding action. And then I kind of know, all right, going forward, the grip is not that great. I need to go a little slower. I need a huge stopping distance compared to a normal or even just like a wet, rainy road. Snow-covered roads, sometimes the stopping distance is not that different, but often you need a massive extra buffer for time to stop when there is snow on the ground. Up until this point, FSD has never really gotten this correct. Sometimes on snow-covered roads, it will drive slower, but it doesn't ever seem to brake any earlier than any other situation. And when you are on that snow, you need far more braking distance than anywhere else. And it's something that I feel like could be added to FSD or trained somehow. I don't know exactly how Tesla would do that because they use video to train these vehicles. And I'm not sure video really gets the point across that you need to be traveling much slower and also braking much earlier and doing much gentler braking in order to properly drive in those snow conditions. But if Tesla does reach 50% of the population by the end of 2025, that means robotaxi will be in this city you're viewing right now. It'll be nearby in Detroit. It'll be in plenty of cities where these conditions need to be met. So Tesla must have a plan in place to get ready for snow, to be ready for these different environments. Now here is another part of the drive I found pretty impressive and interesting. This road used to actually be 2 lanes and has recently been changed so that vehicles can park on the side of the road, and there's only 1 lane going in one direction here. You actually can see FSD turn on the turn signal a bit too early and almost turn onto the wrong street, but then quickly correct itself, continue driving forward and turning onto the correct street, which was really nice. And the great part about this is even though the car wasn't exactly sure which street to turn onto, it didn't brake too hard at that first street. There was somebody behind us. FSD didn't confuse that person or get in their way or give them a bad day. It was very similar to the way I feel like I would be driving in an unfamiliar area where I have a turn coming up, but I don't exactly know where it is, so I need to drive a little slower, and maybe this is it, but oh, actually, hold on, it's the next one. FSD did the same thing here, and I'm guessing that's related to the road being different, and probably the maps have not been updated yet. And even though the maps are not updated, the system is using older maps with an older road layout, FSD handles that situation with no issues. FSD is also spotting pedestrians from very far away. We're going up to a crosswalk here, and somebody is in the crosswalk, but we're far enough away that we don't really need to change our speed until we get closer and see there is another person coming for the same crosswalk, and the car quickly decides, let's slow down and let them cross. Another really impressive move, showing that FSD is not hitting the brakes too hard or too early when you don't need to, which actually was a problem in the past, even with pedestrians that were nowhere near interacting with the car. You'd sometimes get hard braking. That seems to be much better these days, but when a pedestrian does come into the situation, the car slows as it needs to. Now, I actually asked the in-car grok to make this route for me. I didn't even make it myself, and this has led me to a few places I've been before in downtown Ann Arbor, but a lot of these turns and things I have not done. So this left turn here, I have done plenty of times, and it's always a difficult one. There's always lots of pedestrians in this area. You have to wait a really long time, and the car has to be patient. But finally, you do have to poke your nose and get out there. But as we're moving out, we finally got that break in pedestrians. A car comes cruising up. They don't have a stop sign or anything. Their hazards are flashing, though. I'm not sure why. And FSD kind of has to do this weird, like, slowing or almost braking in the intersection kind of in the crosswalk, but it's the same thing any person would do in the same situation. You have to get out there eventually. You can't wait forever. FSD handles it beautifully. Even when this person parks in the middle of the road and lets their passenger out, FSD is perfectly patient. It is not going to get mad at them or go crazy or try to go around them. It's just going to wait for a second and let them continue. And then you can see that the car in front of us actually has the similar situation we just had, where it kind of has to block the crosswalk for a second, let people get out of the way, and then it can move along, while FSD waits behind patiently and gets through there as soon as it's clear. FSD, for pretty much the entire history, has been really safe around pedestrians, but it got to a point a couple of years ago where it was almost too safe. If a pedestrian was anywhere near the car, FSD just didn't want to move. Even if the person wasn't moving or is walking away from us, FSD would freeze up, it would hit the brakes hard sometimes, it would try to start to go and then slam the brakes randomly. Well, now it seems like FSD is more comfortable moving past nearby pedestrians unless they are moving towards the car. And in some of these scenarios, it seemed like FSD was really reading their body to determine what to do. One point during this drive, FSD began to slow for a pedestrian that to me kind of looked like they were going to cross the crosswalk, but they looked at us and then they quickly stopped and looked down at their phone, and it seemed right as they looked at their phone, FSD took that as a cue of, oh, they are not going to cross right now, they're waiting for us, and FSD picked up what it was doing and continued moving on. Now, a lot of the roads down here do not have very good markings, and this is something FSD has handled for a while, but the reason I bring it up is people often comment about unmarked roads, which to me is so funny because, of course, if you've seen any of my content, I show FSD driving on dirt roads quite often, and it is never an issue. Now, personally, for me, FSD drives a little bit too slow on the dirt roads, and it's not that great at avoiding all the big bumps and potholes that you find in dirt roads. So I normally do most of my dirt road driving manually, but that's more for personal preference. I like to drive a lot faster, and of course I want to avoid those potholes better than the current version of FSD is able to do. But that kind of brings me to my next point, and a lot of the complaints that people have as of today, including myself, are personal preference. And this is something I've talked about pretty often, in that when we don't have to supervise, when I don't have to sit here like you're watching in this video, stare straight ahead, watch the car, take over if there's an issue, most of these complaints are going to disappear overnight with the fact that we no longer need to supervise. If the car is going 45 in a 40, or 45 in a 50, I'm not going to notice. I'm not going to care. It's not going to mean anything to me if I'm able to sleep or text or play a game on my phone. On top of that, if Tesla is taking liability, which is kind of the ultimate show that this is actual autonomy, actually full self-driving, then that personal responsibility aspect is out the window. Now, this was one of my favorite interactions of the entire drive. We stop at a stop sign and we wait for this pedestrian to cross, but he decides he's going to wait for us. But at the same time, the car in front of us is waiting for their own pedestrian, and FSD can't go even if it wants to. When the human assesses the situation, they kind of figure out, oh, okay, this car can't go. So FSD ultimately made the correct decision to wait for this pedestrian, even though they were going to wait for us, and it almost seemed like a psychic ability to predict what was going to happen next. Maybe FSD really saw that person across the intersection crossing the street and did all the math to say, we can't go anyway until this other car gets out of our way, let's wait for this pedestrian. So what improvements do we really need from this upcoming FSD version 14? Elon said that this is going to be the biggest jump since going from version 11 to version 12. And that jump saw the deletion of 300,000 lines of code and the first implementation of the end-to-end neural net controlling the vehicle and the driving. Now, version 12 was a big jump for me. I remember being very impressed and seeing a lot of the constant issues I had disappear overnight. But it wasn't the smoothest release, and there were still enough problems where zero intervention drives, I would say, weren't the norm, and my wife couldn't get a zero intervention drive, and I had to do a lot of taking over, and there were still some mistakes, especially the smoothness of that version was not the best. But going from 12 to 13 was the first time I kind of said, hey, you know what? I think Tesla actually could operate a driverless service with the software that's on my vehicle right now. Now, I kind of had a caveat in that, and you can go back and listen to my old videos if you want to hear that. But I said at the time, I feel like I could sit here and not pay attention, but I feel like I still need to be present in case the car does need some help. And it's so funny to see the way that the Tesla robotaxi service is being used today in Austin, Texas. It kind of mirrors that sentiment. Like, yeah, the cars in Austin, Texas are self-driving. There's nobody in the driver's seat, but they are supervised, and there is someone there ready to help the car out if it needs it. They can't do an emergency braking maneuver, they can't swerve the steering wheel at the last second if they need to, but they're kind of hanging out there watching the car in case it needs help, and we've seen that happen a couple of times. I posted the video from Austin where my robotaxi tire touched a parked car, and that ultimately led to the safety passenger getting out and going into the driver's seat and driving away. There was also a video posted on X recently showing a safety driver getting out of the vehicle and getting into the driver's seat to take over. Neither of these were emergency situations, but it was still interesting to see and makes me feel like my prediction for version 13 was pretty correct. Now, if version 14 has a gigantic increase from version 13, the smoothness is already there. I'm not sure how much smoother you can make this software. It drives so well. The big thing we'll really need is lots of different edge cases. We really need that front bumper camera added to the suite so that the vehicle is using that camera as well as it's driving around. On top of some of the basics like school zones, police, emergency vehicles, I'm hoping all of that is kind of a given, that it's going to be integrated, because you need all of that for a robotaxi service, of course. Now, approaching the end of the drive, we see something that hopefully will no longer be an issue in the future with robotaxis, and that is someone getting a parking ticket. FSD pulls right past them and pulls us up directly to the door. I couldn't believe how on the nose this park job was. If this was a robotaxi, once I got out, it could just go continue driving, pick somebody else up, or go to its next destination. If it was my personal vehicle, I could just simply hop out right here. It could stay in this parking spot, and it could wait for me to get back to the car. Overall, still insanely impressed with what we've seen from FSD the past few months, and I cannot wait to see what version 14 brings. I feel like it's going to be really hard for me to get it to mess up. At least I hope so.